that are home watching through live stream and on Hometown TV. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. We are here to discuss the plans for Broad Street West redevelopment, the project which began in early 2017. A tremendous amount of research and discussion has been done by the past and current members of council, city staff, and several professionals that we have retained to bring this project from a vision to a reality. I want to thank everyone who's been involved thus far for your time, attention, and creativity. We have also talked about this process publicly many times, but tonight we are here to share details about the Sub-District 3 project. The purpose of the Broad Street West project is twofold: betterment of our downtown and economic development. There is a strong demand for residential, both walk to town and to transit hubs in our region. Summit is ideally situated to address this need. Additionally, Summit, like many municipalities, strives to provide residents and businesses with the services they need and desire. But all of them come at a cost. The city owns a good portion of the land in the Broad Street West area, and we do not benefit from its value as it is currently utilized. We need to take advantage of what we have. Raising taxes is not the only answer. The redevelopment agreement is nearly complete, and while we can discuss some aspects this evening, we may not be able to disclose certain aspects due to ongoing negotiations. Our planning firm, Topology, Phil Abramson, the principal, will begin tonight's discussion. Again, thank you for joining us, whether you're here at the community center or with us via live stream or Hometown TV. And here we go.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take off my mask while I speak, if that's okay. I've tried to do it the other way, and it's like, like get hyperventilate a little bit, which wouldn't be the best thing. My name is Phil Abramson. I'm the founder of a firm called Topology. We're a planning firm based in the city of Newark. I'm a former Summit resident. Now I live in Mountainside, so I'm right next door. So it's good to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces from a lot of the work that I've done in this city, the master plan, and all the Broad Street West work, and some things before the planning board as well. So it's really good to be here. It's really good to be in front of people and not a bunch of square boxes with smiling faces. So I'm also joined here. I guess I should just introduce you guys now, right? This is John Cortell from L&M. He's the representative from the development firm that is going to be building the project, hopefully. And Alex Merlucci, the architect and designer of the project. They're going to be doing most of the talking this evening. My role is really just to kind of set this up and provide some level of context for their work. Just some quick notes that I wanted to share with you. The last time that we were, and this team was in front of the public, was last May 2021. At that time, we promised a few things. One was to do a traffic study and to show you the results of a traffic study that looked at all the intersections in this area and how potential future development would impact those and what kind of changes and improvements might be needed as part of this. And then to show you the open space. What will the streets look like? What will the plazas look like? What will the parks look like? What do we have to gain as part of this in terms of the neighborhood fabric of Broad Street West, which right now isn't really something that you could call neighborhood fabric. It's parking lots, but will be beautiful one day, and I'm excited for you to see that. So the other big thing, point number 2, is just to provide some more specificity in terms of the terms. How many units, how many parking spaces, the kind of numbers of that will define this program and define the project. There will be an LOI coming forward and being shared with the public letter of intent. Essentially, it's a tool used in real estate to kind of define the broad strokes of a deal before you drill down into the details of a contract. And we thought that seeing that LOI in the abstract, seeing that a bunch of black and white numbers on paper doesn't tell the full story, does not provide the full context of sort of what all is happening here. So in order to give that some background and to bring that, that simple, relatively simple document to bring it to life, that's what this presentation is really intended to do, to provide a refresher and provide some context. And since our last meeting in May, we've met with several stakeholders who I really do thank for their contributions. These projects are always made better from conversations. They're going to be made better from your contributions this evening. And I thank you all for that, and I thank the Summit Historic Preservation Commission, Summit Downtown Inc., Summit Environmental Commission, Summit Housing Authority, the YMCA, St. Teresa's, and Summit Public Art. They've all been consulted on this and have all made meaningful contributions, and there's been some meaningful changes as a result of their input. So I'm gonna get into the slides, if that's okay. So just to kind of refresh everybody what we're talking about, when we talk about Subdistrict 3, which is like this super clinical name for a neighborhood, right? Is this the, I don't know if there is a laser. I thought there was. But you can see it has the number 3 on it, and it has the word firehouse above that number 3. It's the area bounded by Broad Street West, Morris Avenue, and Cedar Street. So we thought it was important to mention, in the total redevelopment area, everything that you see in red, the total tax revenues has been, in last year, in 2021, $135,000. The municipal share of that was just over $27,000. In this particular area, the total tax revenue was just under $30,000, and the total municipal revenue was just over $6,000 for this significant piece of land in your downtown. If we could go to the next one, please. Or I'm controlling it. Sorry. So what was the vision for Broad Street? This is the stuff in the in the redevelopment plan. And it really had to do with the relationship to the downtown, right? That we wanted to be additive to the downtown, not duplicative, not compete with the downtown, to create more patrons at the doorstep of the downtown, to patronize restaurants and businesses that are there, to provide a variety of appropriately scaled infill housing options near the train station, and to offset the costs of the firehouse relocation, which is currently underway, which was a necessary thing that this city had to undertake. And then to generate some new sources of public revenue. I remember as the mayor was talking, brings you back to conversations we were having 5-6 years ago about raising taxes and about creating new investment. And here we are tonight, kind of on the eve of that new investment. So as somewhat of an alternative to the former of those. I'm going to keep asking you to change these slides. So, and what was the vision? And I found this to be a little challenging to read personally. So, it was to create a hub for this Subdistrict 3. It was really supposed to be a hub of a new neighborhood, adjacent to an active downtown that provides experiences not currently available within and complements the existing built environment and complements the downtown. So another key point here is to kind of look at how this has all transpired. I don't know that I need to read every single point on here. I think that you're not here to read timelines. You're here to see some cool pictures. But it really started with the master plan in 2016. The redevelopment process kind of went ahead in earnest in 2019. And I think the things that I do think are worth mentioning are the more recent history. That this group, the partnership between L&M and Toll Brothers, was designated in late 2019. The steering committee, really for the course of 2020, worked to kind of refine these plans that you're going to see today in terms of architecture, in terms of street design, and really hoping that the pandemic would end in like 3 weeks and we'd be able to come back to you and share it. Here we are 2 years later. So we had this public presentation in May, and now continue to refine the feedback. So here we are this evening, really here to show you the updated project numbers, for the redeveloper to show you the building design, the redeveloper to show you open space design, and for the traffic engineer retained by the redeveloper to share with you sort of what the traffic impacts are in this area. So what are we talking about here? What does this project include? Overall, 140 residential units, 112 of which are market rate, 21 are COA, which is kind of a vestige of New Jersey policy. It's the affordable housing units. And then 7 are workforce housing units, which are special units. They're unique. This is not something that's done in a lot of other towns. This is something that sits in between regular market rate housing and affordable housing. So this is for people who are making a strong and decent wage, but might find themselves unable to afford housing in the city. 196 parking spaces are required. The purchase price for city land, and this gets more into those business terms that will be communicated at a future council date, $8 million purchase price for the land, a 30-year pilot, $1.75 million redevelopment area bond, which is a debt instrument that's used in redevelopment areas to fund things like cleanup, infrastructure, road improvements, all the sort of public improvements that are necessary for this, that are paid for through the pilot, not through tax dollars. And the conservative estimate in terms of school children is 27, which we all think is very conservative. But, and that number comes from this. It's called Community Data Analytics. It's a product of eConsult, a company out of Philadelphia. So it's based on 5-year census data, and yeah. So what would the next steps be, potentially? In February 15th, there's a potential resolution, or at least a discussion in public at the Common Council regarding a letter of interest consistent with the presentation that you're going to see today, with some more detailed business terms. In March, next month, there will be a public information session regarding like this idea of pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, question and answer. It's not going to be about this project per se. It's going to be about how they work, what they are, what's that mechanically, how do they function. In April, a public hearing potentially regarding the redevelopment agreement and the financial agreement, which is sort of the whole package of how the city and the developer could move ahead. And then in May, the final adoption. That's a 2-step process, the financial agreement, which is why it requires a second step in May. Then the earliest that you would see this in front of the planning board for site plan, which is the architecture, the engineering, all of that, would be some point this summer, likely in June. So now my part is done. I'm going to stick around to answer any questions that everybody has. Ugh, I have to look at myself. And then, yeah, so they're going to, developer's going to come up with their architect. They're going to go through their presentation. They have a video. It's pretty cool to show you guys. And yeah, again, I look forward to answering any questions you have. I guess we want to answer them now. I don't know. Can we wait till the end? Is that okay? Do you mind? Do you mind if we wait till the end? Can we wait until the end? Is that okay? I appreciate that. Thank you. This is John Cortell.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to follow your lead and take my mask off briefly to make sure that I'm clear. So my name is Jonathan Cortell. I'm a partner at and with L&M Development and its affiliates. L&M is a New York City-based enterprise with a business that has taken us to far-flung places, but I'm very excited to be here today as a resident of Maplewood. This is a coming home. I'm a regular patron of all the splendor that is Summit, and so very much appreciate the chance to join you here tonight and to continue to participate in the very positive dialogue that has been a part of the last 2 years as we've developed and shaped the vision that we'll share with you here. I'm thrilled to call out my partner in this, Brian, who's from Toll Brothers Apartment Living. Brian and I have collaborated in several instances, and we do so here with substantial appreciation for the collective effort that has represented itself in the work product that we'll show you. We gain in part because the context in which we hope to develop has such a robust palette of offerings. It's clear that we take inspiration from this location, and we gain from the clear adherence to the upfront goals and the vigorous partnership we've received from the town, from the city leadership, starting with the mayor and with the steering committee assembled. We have found the product that we're going to present to you today better for the engagement we've had, and we've had a lot of engagement. So maybe without further ado, I'm going to ask Alex to start walking us through the materials instead of standing here blathering on. Good, I get to keep a mic so I can edit you.
Yeah, perfect.
Good.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Merlucci. I'm an associate partner with the firm of Ingles Architecture and Engineering. We're a New Jersey-based architecture and engineering firm, and we've worked with John on many projects and have worked on this Broad Street West redevelopment plan for quite a while, and we've really enjoyed the process. I think what you're going to see today is really a design informed by the feedback of the community. We've enjoyed that engagement, and I think we've really taken it to heart in what we're going to present. I think the last time we were before the community.
Excuse me, Alex. I'm supposed
No
to tell
problem.
you to hold the mic closer to your mouth
I
so
thought
that
I
you
was
are
doing a
more
good job.
audible.
Amy's really mad at me. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't
Sorry, Amy.
doing it well.
I think now I lost my train of thought. We the last time we were before the community, we focused largely on the building, and we have more to show you tonight on the building. But this isn't just about the building. This opportunity is really about the creation of a neighborhood and all of the open spaces and public improvements that come with that. So we have a lot of focus tonight on the open spaces and kind of the neighborhood public realm improvements. So we're excited to show you that. So I think if we can jump into the PDF.
There are some folks in the audience who say they still can't hear you, so if you want to be a little bit more aggressive
No
with your
problem.
voice.
So, okay, to return to what Phil started, we're focused on Subdistrict 3. So Subdistrict 3, again, is bound by Morris Street on the bottom of the page and then Broad Street on the top. The building area is bound within the red line that you can see around the perimeter. The building is the area in gray, and then we're going to talk about all of the public spaces that surround it. The green, the gray, which is the sidewalk and other public spaces. We've held a strong focus on sustainability throughout this process, and you're going to hear more about this as we talk about the public spaces. The sustainability integration in the design is important not only for the building, but also for the site. From a building perspective, some of the important sustainability considerations that have been important to our process are things like renewable energy. So we plan for the building to include a solar array on the rooftop, which is the area that you can see in orange. That's at the uppermost portion of the building and will generate electricity for the new development and offset some of our electricity demand. And we also anticipate that while there's a significant amount of green space included at the ground level that will be accessible to all that walk through this new neighborhood, we also plan to integrate green roof and other green technology into the building. So the green area at the back corner that you can see there is a green roof area on top of the building itself. So in beginning to think how the building engages with the ground and creates the neighborhood, we focused on a number of things. The first was circulation and how this site connects into all the sites around it. So connectivity across Broad Street and creating a very pedestrian-friendly connection and one that is safe for pedestrians has been a really driving force here. The same with Morris Avenue. Right now, I think crossing those main streets is kind of a daunting task, and our goal here is to be able to make that a very friendly experience. So you can see the dashed blue arrows, which are the new street crossings, 2 on Morris, 1 across Broad Street, 2 in the middle of Broad Street at Chestnut, 1 at the corner of Cedar, which is the right side of the page, and Broad Street, and then really that whole area in pink along Cedar Street is meant to be an exterior plaza type experience. Cedar Street will remain open for two-way traffic, but it will be treated in such a way that it feels more as a pedestrian street and can be closed down for events. Sure, no problem. Right now on the site, in the bottom left-hand corner is the municipal parking lot. Just up from that, where it says Broad Street, is the existing firehouse building that's on the corner. So that's you can. Yeah, that's a little light because it's below the blue. Sure. Broad Street is the street along the topmost portion of the page. Morris is down at the bottom here, and Cedar Street is on the right side. The library is not in this picture. It's on the other side of Cedar Street. So the firehouse is on the corner, and then there's an office building on the right side where the purple is.
I just want to take the moment to say that you will not be quizzed on any of this, and that the material will be available online for you to study at your leisure. I think one of the things on this page that I just want to herald is that the Y, the existing Y, is located at the top of the page to the right where the symbols are. We have not depicted it on the plan, and Cedar Street is what runs from the top of the page to the bottom of the page all the way on the right. Does that help to orient you? St. Teresa Memorial Hall is in the green area in the bottom portion of the page. And we will, as we go through, we will make a point of highlighting our engagement with those neighboring properties. Okay.
Sure. No problem. So just again to orient everybody, Morris Avenue is on the bottom. This is the corner of Morris and Broad here, right here. Broad Street runs along the top of the page. St. Teresa's Memorial Hall is right here. St. Teresa's Church is across the street. This is the funeral home. This is the Otterstadt Insurance Building right here. And then this is Cedar Street. So if we were to keep going off the page, this is the library. And then up on the right side of the page would be the Y. So this is Cedar Street up and down. Right. So then the firehouse is located currently right in the middle where the little hand is bouncing all over the place. So really that whole gray area in the center from the corner here to Cedar Street is the new building.
Do you want to bounce to another sheet? And
Sure.
maybe the next sheet's colors will resonate more with people.
So this next slide is meant to speak to the green spaces that are now being created on the new site and connecting to the existing green spaces. So again, we understand that there's a plethora of really wonderful outdoor opportunities and including the Village Green. And what we aim to do is to create additional green resources and outdoor park type spaces that can be integrated into this neighborhood. So you can see the connections to St. Teresa's across the street, and then ultimately creating green space that will tie into Subdistrict 2 across and into the Village Green on the right side, and then to Subdistrict 1 ultimately in the future. No. No, we're leaving that in place. So this next slide is meant to highlight the three zones that we focused on the public realm improvements. So on the right side in yellow, you can see what we're calling Cedar Plaza. So this is a combination of the Cedar Street right-of-way as well as a new plaza that we're creating from the curb back to the face of the building. At the largest point at the corner, this is a space that's in excess of 27 feet. It's a very large plaza that will enable the new retail that's at the corner here to have spillage onto the sidewalk for outdoor seating, for events, And this is an area that can be closed down for outdoor events at all times of the year.
Alex, I would just add here too that because so much of our process has been about embracing that which is existing and not sort of ignoring the context, we are very sensitive to the fact that those users of the Y who may be more likely to frequent the Y as we get further away from COVID, these folks frequent this edge of the building to access the pool and basketball court of the Y. Pickup and drop off happens on Cedar Street. So some portion of this exercise is to recognize that that happens and create a pedestrian-friendly zone that will enable the continued use of that space for the purpose that it was used for and will remain used for.
The second zone that we focused on is really what's shown in blue. So this is all of Broad Street, which right now is really the front of the firehouse and then parking lot. So with the backdrop of the new building, this area aims to create a residential feeling neighborhood that will have significant sidewalk and green space that wraps all the way around the corner, down Broad Street onto Morris, and we'll have sidewalk opportunities for seating, public engagement, and things of that nature. We've also used that space to create another plaza at the corner of Morris Avenue and Broad Street to pull the building away from that corner and provide for additional outdoor opportunities. And then the third space is the space that you see in green, which starts behind the building next to St. Teresa's Memorial Hall and then connects all the way through out to Cedar Plaza. So you can see that kind of tying in back here. And the idea there was to create a pedestrian opportunity to connect from Cedar all the way through that new public green space, which we'll talk about in a minute. So focusing first on Broad Street, I'm going to talk about some statistics just to give you an idea of the size of this space. So the overall pedestrian pavement area is 9,500 square feet. We plan to install 47 trees in this area, 6 bike racks, and 6,380 square feet of planting. It's a fairly large space. One of the important elements that we're integrating is the new crosswalk across Broad that connects Chestnut onto this side of the street. We anticipate creating pedestrian safety measures as part of that, including tabletops, beacons, and things like that, so that this will really be a safe place for people to cross Broad Street and engage with the new development. And then you can see from right to left the new sidewalk that winds down the street with green space integrated all along, and then bringing you down to the plaza at the corner of Morris and Broad here. The building's 5 stories. We're going to show you in a little bit an animation where you can see what this feels like as a pedestrian walking around the building and all of the new spaces that we'll be creating. No problem.
We're going to leave an extended period for you to pepper us with questions.
So this is a depiction of this Broad Street treatment. So you can see the street on the left side with where the cars would be, a 5-foot wide tree pit. So this is a planting strip along the street. The 8-foot wide sidewalk, which is in excess of what a typical sidewalk is. Most normal sidewalks are 5 feet. This is a very wide sidewalk that provides for a nice pedestrian opportunity there. And then a 10-foot wide bioretention planting bed, which is to create a buffer between that new pedestrian space and the building. And these are some images that are precedents of work that looks and feels similar to how we anticipate this new Broad Street experience to be.
Yeah, Alex, I just wanted to call out that we are leveraging other team members' materials here. We are working with a landscape architect who has an impressive portfolio of work, and I think some of these represent real in-place executions that we might use as inspiration. We'll make that clearer as we go forward, but keep your questions until the end, and we'll try to get everybody's points.
So just a few more photo images here of other installations that use similar plantings, materials, and streetscape. The second zone is what I referred to earlier as Cedar Plaza. So we've carefully pulled the building back both from Cedar Street, which is on the right side of the page, and Broad Street, which is at the top of the page. And we've created a very wide area that functions as a plaza that wraps all the way from Cedar Street around the corner onto Broad and pulls the building away from that corner. So to create an outdoor space there that can be used for programming, we'll include an art installation. And this area in total will include over 2,000 square feet of plantings, 21 trees, 6 bike racks, and a significant area for other outdoor opportunities such as sidewalk seating for the retailers. And so you can see here 2 images which are section cuts through the space. The first at the top, you can see Broad Street on the left behind the bench. And then this is really sidewalk all the way from there back to the building. So we have a 27-foot public space, which is the area in the middle there, followed by a cafe restaurant seating on the right side, so 8-foot designated for outdoor tables. And then similar on the section below, you can see that pulled into the space that we have opportunities for a sculpture garden, seating, and then again the restaurant seating close to the retail space. And then this pulls around to Cedar Street. So you can see now Cedar Street is on the right here. You can see the curb on the left, the curb on the right. That's Cedar Street. This is showing what Cedar Street might look like if it was closed down temporarily for an evening, for an event. This has been common throughout COVID that public spaces have been used to supplement indoor spaces where outdoor events can be held for the communities. So you can see again Cedar Street on the right. An 8-foot planting area, an 8-foot internal walkway, and then another 5-foot planter up against the building. So we're really working to create, to use the streets as public space and then provide ample space between the curb and the building so that you're not getting what's more typical of a narrow sidewalk, but rather creating large green spaces that buffer between the street and the building.
The street closure dynamic was depicted on the slide, on the bottom half of the slide. The top half would be presented in part to clarify the vehicular access we expect to continue through Cedar, right? That's the zone we think is serving the wide drop-offs for pool and basketball court use. We understand that we don't want to impede that. This is a combo slide depicting the day-to-day on the top and the bottom on special event day.
And then one of the things that we've focused on are the use of pavement materials other than asphalt. So Cedar Street has been depicted as something that looks more variegated, and we anticipate using things like pavers, stamped concrete, to create more of a plaza feel in this area.
Right, and to communicate to the vehicles that it's a pedestrian-friendly zone. So it's not a typical street condition. It's where we expect people to get out of their car and go to the Y, get out of their car, go to the restaurant or the retail that will be in our building.
And pedestrian focus has really been really an important idea in thinking of all these spaces. And then again, here you can see some of the ideas related to creating bench and seating opportunities throughout those landscape areas as you move through the neighborhood and around the building. Lighting will also be an important element. We don't anticipate just using standard street lighting, but rather using the lighting as another design element to activate the spaces with things like catenary lights that you see on the top. Those are the kind of bistro-looking lights. And then other light installations, both at grade and above.
And much of our inspiration is coming from Summit itself. While some of these images may look like they're from someplace else, a great number of the images that we've used have been guided by things we see in Summit.
And then I mentioned street furniture. So street furniture is also an important element in creating spaces that can be breakout spaces from the main pedestrian circulation around the building. So using things like bike racks and other sculptural elements throughout the development will be an important idea as we finalize those decisions. And so the third space that we focused on was what we're calling the public green. So this is the space in between the building and St. Teresa's Memorial Hall. It connects all the way from Morris Avenue on the left, through the site, past the building, and then back to Cedar Street on the right side. We anticipate that this space will include over 2,700 square feet of planting, a programming lawn, which you can see at the bottom. This is a public green space that can be used for events of over 1,300 square feet. Behind that is a 1,200 square foot community garden. We intend to include a shade structure up front, bike racks, and over 42 street trees. Park trees, actually, in this case. One of the important elements is that connection that I mentioned. Again, the connection comes from Cedar through the site and then connects into the public green in the back, and will also engage with St. Teresa's Memorial Hall. So that space is depicted on these two images on the right. It would be a space that includes 8 feet of width and creates a connection, an internal walkway of 5 feet with a landscape trellis and artwork opportunities along that pedestrian connection through the site. So you can see those depicted on the right side here. And these are some images of what that connection might feel like, landscaped with the trellis above, and then artwork integration onto the wall of the building as you walk through there. St. Teresa's Memorial Hall has been an important beacon in this whole development, and we've engaged with them throughout the process. I think we envisioned this public green space engaging with the St. Teresa's Memorial Hall and allowing the pathways to connect and utilize some of the space that's out there as well. You can see that the sculpture that remains on the top left-hand side is intended to remain in place. And this is just another enlarged image now without the shading over it, where you can see the overall composition, including the St. Teresa's property and then that public green space that we spoke of in the back. And these are some images of what that public green space is intended to feel like. Areas for programming. That's the image on the top left is meant to depict what that the lawn may be used for outdoor events. The image on the bottom left-hand corner is kind of a look and feel of that pathway winding through in between buildings, and then another landscape image on the right. These are some images of a community garden installation. So this is a real opportunity, we think, for the community, and again, is a fairly large element in that new public green space in the back. I mentioned sustainability early on, and I think one of the important elements of the landscape portion of this is using native and drought-tolerant species. So all of the plants that we intend to use are native to our region, and again, will be drought-tolerant. So these are just some of the images of the trees that would be implemented, and then the lower growing native shrubs and grasses. And this slide is important to indicate what we think is the opportunity to event plan these spaces as well. So we didn't think about them just during the day and as passive recreation. We also thought about what this might mean to the community as an opportunity to create event programming throughout this new neighborhood. So we mentioned the use of Cedar Street, which you can see on the right-hand side. We believe that this can be closed down for community events. Those little yellow rectangles you see, squares that you see, are 10 by 10 event tents for things like craft fairs and other types of community events. We also think that the public green space in the back, which you can see with programming on the public lawn, is a good opportunity for things like movies in the park and other types of park-type programming. And again, the smaller plaza on the corner of Morris and Broad is also available for programming and other types of events.
And by describing this and alluding to events, our intention is not to cannibalize any other resources or programming, but offer more opportunities. I happen to be a big fan of the farmers market, so mine is only an idea here to extend opportunities for similar concepts that may be attractive to Summit residents who have ideas that just haven't had a place.
And so just a couple of enlarged images. You can see again the lawn on the bottom side here, and then the plaza at the corner of Morris and Broad. And these are some images of those kinds of programming and events that we envision being able to take place in those spaces. I mentioned street furniture and moments of public engagement. We've held on to this concept of a children's walk through the site And so what we hope to integrate as part of that street furniture and moments of public activation along the street are areas for children to engage with the street furniture, whether it be these are some examples of integrated musical installations, artwork on the right side, bike racks or other installations, and art that really kind of create a community and provide for additional opportunities for engagement throughout this new neighborhood.
And again, in this regard, we are cognizant that there have been ideas like this expressed locally. I think the library had a plan similar to this as we've presented it here, and to the extent that we can help realize something, we would welcome it.
So I think that concludes the open space portion of this presentation. I think I'm going to go back to one of the early slides. What we've prepared is a digital animation of what the experience of being in this new neighborhood would feel like, both with these public spaces integrated, as well as
Who's that guy?
I don't know. As well as the building behind. So really it's kind of the whole composition of the building with these public spaces. The development, as I had mentioned earlier, is really pedestrian focused. So the entire animation is taken as if you are a pedestrian, starting at the library, walking up Cedar Street, down Broad Street, and experiencing all of these spaces. There are also a few indications that demonstrate the context of the building, the heights of the adjacent buildings, the height of our building, and how that relates to all the existing heights and buildings in the neighborhood area.
So, and we're hopeful that the animation does the job of answering questions like the one you asked about the parking conditions on streets. So we weren't ducking them. We were hoping this is, cool enough that does answer everybody's questions.
Does this remote do that?
Maybe
Yeah.
Phil has a way of,
Some magic?
yeah, you're right. Phil, can you turn the page for us? Oh, okay. right, so having presented that, we're going to roll into the traffic presentation, which was to be presented by our traffic engineer, who is unable to connect through the system. So Alex and I are going to walk you through, at a very high level, the material that was presented in the traffic study, and note that the traffic study in its complete form will be available on the Summit website. So without further ado, do you want to pop it up?
So we've engaged Stonefield Engineering as our traffic consultant to address all of the parking-related and traffic-related concerns for the site. They've been working directly with the city's consultant to provide a holistic vision for the traffic. So the new development includes 2 vehicular entrances. There's a vehicular entrance off of Morris Avenue at the bottom side of the page. This provides access into a basement level parking garage. Similarly, on Cedar Street, there is an additional vehicle entrance that provides parking internal to the building. That parking on the Cedar Street side will be available for public use. So as Phil had noted earlier, the development includes 140 residential units, 10,000 square feet of retail space, and for the traffic purposes, they assumed 4,000 square feet of convenience store space, which is the most intensive type of use. The redevelopment plan that defines the Broad Street West redevelopment area required very specific intersections to be studied. So those were listed on the left side here, the primary streets of Morris Avenue, Broad Street, Railroad Avenue, Chestnut Avenue, and Union Place. So the traffic study really has been directly responsive to what the redevelopment plan has required for this development. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm going to fumble through this count information. So the traffic study included counts during COVID, but at the end. So in September, when traffic was back up to more normal conditions, they counted 2 separate days, and the counts included all cars, trucks, buses, pedestrians, and bicyclists. They also used drone video, street level videos, and observations. So they were actually out on site during these times, September 23rd and September 25th. So they used a weekday in the morning during rush hour, and then in the evening rush hour, and then on Saturday, which are theoretically different types of users that are using the streets. And then they focused on the peak times on those different days. They also studied the different modes of transit options that are available in this area, including the train, the buses, and then the streets themselves. And then they studied how many trips will be generated by the new development. So in the morning, you can see the AM trips, 131 pedestrian trips, 156 vehicular trips, and then 19 bicycle trips. So these are really the peak flow of any type of transportation in and out of the building. In the evening, the trip generation generated 115 new vehicle trips, 97 pedestrian trips, and then 15 bicycle trips. And then on Saturdays, 160 pedestrian trips, 184 new vehicle trips, and then 21 bicycle trips. So really this is to understand the impact of the new development as it relates to vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles, and on those peak hours. And then this is just meant to understand the commercial distribution throughout the area, including surrounding towns. They also studied the impact of journey to work, so the percentage flow out from the site in various directions, north, south, east, and west, to understand the impacts on the adjacent street grid. And then honing in really close to the development, they observed the intersections immediately adjacent to our site. So the acceptable level of service that's available given the width and size of those intersections, the history of crashes or other incidents in those intersections to understand if there are any other improvements that are necessary for these intersections, and those improvements will be included in our site plan application as we move forward with the project. So the first intersection was Morris Avenue and Broad Street, as well as Locust. You can see again Broad Street on the top, Morris on the bottom, and then Locust Street on the left side here. And then, similar to what we discussed earlier, that traffic study also highlighted the pedestrian level improvements that will be included as part of the development, and focused on areas where we can create safe pedestrian travel on our site and out of our site to the adjacent properties.
Are you sure you're not a traffic engineer? You're doing a really nice job.
I've listened to them a lot. They're really boring, actually.
But you're doing it in a
Really,
way that's
really
really
boring. Traffic is
digestible,
really
so I'm going to give you credit.
So again, to address parking, we have parking at 2 levels within the building. I mentioned those vehicular entry and entries earlier. We have a basement level parking, which is access off of Morris Avenue. It includes elevator access into the building for the residents. This is the plan on the left. And then the plan on the right includes the first floor of the building, which includes a vehicle entrance off of Cedar Street into the parking lot internal to the building. That parking lot also is directly behind the retail spaces that will be at the corner of Broad and Cedar and will be available for public use.
As well as residential use when the public is not accessing the retail spaces.
And this is the traffic engineer putting up renderings of the building because they don't do renderings. That's it.
In a desperate effort to amplify how nice the buildings look. All right, well, I think that concludes the presentation that we intended to make, and now we would encourage questions. I'm going to take this moment before we do to make sure that people know that to the extent the questions aren't articulated today, there is an email that has been established to receive those questions. I believe the email address is bsw, Broad Street West, @cityofsummit.org. As such, no pressure to get all your questions in today because we will attend to any questions you send by way of the email. So, is it appropriate for me to go ahead? Okay. Oh, you've done this before. Okay, so what we're encouraging people to do is maybe come up and join us here. There's a mic. I don't know that I want you to share. Do you want to share my mic? No. Nobody wants to share my mic. Bad idea.
But this way, people at home can hear the questions.
That makes sense. Okay, so for those willing, I will stand more than 6 feet away from that mic so that more than 6 feet. Oh, he's saying go over here. Yeah, I think it's get up and stay 6 feet away from one another, I guess.
What?
Sure, you're really good at it. Okay, great.
Wait, who am I? Okay. Wait, hold on, I have my
I'm fine with
notes.
the moderation.
Who am I talking to?
Who sits there?
Okay.
Look right at that camera.
Okay. I have some. Okay. I have some comments and some questions about this. One is, you're talking about the 5-story building. I've been in town long enough to remember. I don't know if anyone remembers when Bagel Chateau on Springfield Avenue. There was a whole big deal because they wanted to build an additional story on top, and the town went nuts. It was too tall. So this building is a lot taller than that. And we know what happened to Bagel Chateau. Got knocked down, and a bigger building got put in its place. So that's one of my concerns. Another concern I have here is the building is taking up, but first of all, I didn't hear much about the building, but it's going from Cedar Street, it's going from Cedar Street to Morris Avenue. And it basically looks like it's creating a giant wall. So if I leave Memorial Hall and I want to walk over to the post office, there's no way to cut through the building. Is there any plans to cut through that building? Is there going to be any pedestrian passage from Broad Street to the other side?
I'm just going to invite them to come sit up front.
I can't answer these questions.
Okay, Mary. And can we get just a schematic, like one of the plans up on there so people could walk through? What's that? 1 second, please.
Mhm.
Do you want to address that?
I can address it, yeah.
It's a question about whether there's a walk through the building for stuff.
So to answer the question about the connectivity from Morris to Cedar, the areas in blue are all pedestrian connections. So you would be able to walk through that new public green space directly to Cedar to get to the post
So
office.
no, I'm leaving Memorial Hall.
You're out the front here.
I do a lot of walking and biking. Okay. I want to cut over to Broad Street and get to the police department. You're saying I have to go around?
Yeah, you would just walk along the sidewalk.
Yeah,
over
that's
to-
what I'm
over
saying.
to-
Is that's
over
what I'm
to
asking.
Chestnut.
You know how there's buildings, like I know in Madison, downtown Madison, you can go from the parking lot to the street. Is there going to be any pedestrian openings between that building, or is it just a solid building the whole way?
There's no pedestrian connection from the public green directly through the building, no.
Okay, that's something that I would recommend, that I think would help a lot. The other one, like I said, I think the building's way too tall. I know you're comparing it to the YMCA and the senior housing, but that's not accurate. I mean, you have to really compare it to downtown. And the other thing is, you mentioned a community garden. Are you aware that we do have a community garden in Summit?
I think we are.
And we do not even sell out all the plots. We have so many plots for low income, and those don't sell out. And I think every year there's actually a couple extra plots that we use for the food pantry. So, and there's also the senior housing has a community garden also. So, and I don't know if you grow vegetables. They're not pretty. The gardens are not pretty. They look ugly. Okay, it looks like a bunch of weeds. That was not on your diagram showing these. Like I said,
It looks good in the pictures.
you don't
I know
grow
what you mean.
vegetables.
I understand.
We don't need another community garden. We have a community garden unless there's something that we don't know, that the community garden, we're going to lose it, and that's going to be the new community garden. That's another concern. And the green space that you're talking about, that you showed the pictures that look like pictures look like they're from Battery Park City, a massive green space. How many square feet did you say that green grass was?
I think the overall area in the back there was about 13,000 square feet. Obviously, it's not as big as Battery
the
Park.
grass area.
Oh, the grass area itself was 1,300 square feet. That's just the lawn, but that's not the whole expansive area.
But the 1,300 square feet. I mean, I'm not that good, like spatially, but that's not that big, right? 1,300.
It's not an enormous expansive area, but we're working with the area that we have on the site. And I think to address the point about the community garden, I think what we're trying to do is provide for opportunities that can add to the neighborhood. If the community garden is not the right fit for the community, I think we understand that, and we're here to hear this kind of feedback and to respond. So I think that's the reason for this tonight. We started somewhere, and we want to hear what the community
Yeah,
wants
I'm
and
just a
needs.
little concerned that like maybe there hasn't been enough community. I mean, I was here years ago. I don't know how many years ago. We had Post-its all on the wall. The fact that, like I said, the community garden was even mentioned, and I don't even think you do even know where our community garden is. Have you seen our community garden? Okay, so that's the thing. Is there's the community garden. You need to have a parking lot next to the community garden because you're taking your vegetables and you bring it right to your car. You can't just have. You can't take your stuff from the community garden and walk down go into a parking lot that you have to take a elevator to. So I just think there's a lot of things that are missing. In terms of, I don't know if there's other people around here that feel the same way as I do, that need to be addressed. And I heard a lot about everything else, but this is a large building, and it seems to me that everything there is being built for a retail so they can have tables outside. And that's not what we need. And the other problem is Cedar Street. The YMCA is, I don't know the hours right now, the YMCA is constantly open. I mean, people are dropping their kids off for swim lessons. Swim lessons are like 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't even know what it is. That cannot be. You're gonna drop your kid off. You can't have some, a little. There's never a time the Y is not open. So to say, on an evening or to say on a Sunday, the Y's open all those times. So the Cedar Street could never be closed. So that's another thing. I'm just wondering if you got feedback from anybody else. I mean, I use the front entrance to the Y, but that's the Y, the pool and the gym at the Y is used constantly. So that's just a couple things.
All really good feedback. Thank you. Were there others who have comments or questions to add?
Good evening. Yeah, I have a few comments. Who will be responsible for garbage pickup, the city or private? You don't know? That's a big expense. I'd like to know who's paying for the garbage pickup. My taxes paying for this?
We will
I
address
would like
that.
an answer to that, a definite answer. Was the
Fantastic.
joint meeting at all consulted regarding the flushing of toilets, the flow? You have no idea what I'm talking about.
Are you asking about whether the stormwater
joint-
capacity, the capacity for water and
For-
sewers
yeah,
there?
right. Did you-
Yeah, we have a civil engineer on board who has evaluated the capacity and affirmed its
Okay,
existence.
so that won't interfere with any, we won't
No,
need new
the-
piping or anything?
Piping will be provided by us as part of our connection to the main.
Okay. I wasn't aware at all that there was going to be retail there. Now, we have a downtown that we have, many of us, including myself, have spent years trying to cultivate and keep going. And now, aside from all this extra housing, you're also bringing in more retail space outside of what I consider the business district. I'm just going to say I'm not in favor of that.
Noted.
and-
It was a part of the redevelopment plan, and we had
No.
made every effort to adhere to the redevelopment plan.
Okay, now, the parking lot on Cedar Street for the Y and the library, will that remain?
No, it's not really a subject of this conversation.
It is
so
because
assume
it is because of Cedar Street and your plans for it. That parking lot's vital for especially young mothers bringing their kids to that. I want to know if that's going to remain.
Well, for the purposes of this presentation, it remains because it's not impacted by the development we're contemplating today.
Okay, in other words, you're saying it could go away.
That it's outside the scope of the conversation today.
Okay, you're just passing the buck.
I don't know if that's what I'm doing.
Yes, you are.
That is not what I'm doing.
You're passing the buck. Yes, you are. Don't
Why
Don't
not?
give me that
What-
nonsense.
I'm-
You're passing the buck. Now, I've got a whole bunch of questions, but I'm going to ask one more, and then I'll let someone else come up. The pilot. Now, it was said that the property is worth $8 million. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I said that, but that is
I don't
the
know.
content.
I'm not saying you said it. Somebody said $8 million. All
Okay.
right, and it's a 30-year pilot. Do you have any idea what that's going to be every year?
I think what the mayor said at the beginning was that there will be a follow-up on that, and we'll give you
Okay,
all the details you're looking for on that, too.
I've got more, but I'll let somebody else get up for the moment.
Sounds like you want more.
I didn't realize it was going to be 5 stories, so I'll just say that at the moment. It's way too big.
Noted.
I'm very disappointed that parking lot next to the small church is going away. When we built City Hall, that was an overflow parking lot for City Hall and an overflow parking lot for visitors at the Senior Citizens Complex. So now you're taking away extra parking. I even see city vehicles parked there at night because we just don't have a lot of parking. That area, I just think, is something that should have been left intact. I'm very concerned about this really has nothing to do with you fellas. So where'd the mayor go? To the elected officials, as a former elected official, I know how tough it is. I really do. But you really have to reach out to all the citizens. When will you make a mailing to every mailing address in town about this? Because over the summer, and talking to people, I was just shocked at how many people have no idea what's going on. And I was shocked tonight, and I've tried to stay out of it. You know, I've said the ignores, but I just feel compelled. It's too big. 5 stories. We fought for years to keep the limits down, as the lady before said about the one property on the street. It's just a big, big project. I'd really like you to take a lot more time to rethink some of this before you finalize it in just 2 months. Now, I'm going to sit down. Somebody else can go right ahead.
I'm going to speak as loudly as I can to the microphone. Thank you, everyone, for your presentation tonight and for your video. It was helpful. The $8 million that was referenced was actually in your project numbers in the first slide I believe you presented. I do have a question about that. You said $8 million purchase price for city land. I'm assuming that's just this specific district we're talking about. And as you likely know, we have homes in Summit that sell for upwards of $3 million. So how did you snag such a good deal in a very hot real estate market? Can you talk a little bit about that purchase price? I don't know if it's the city or otherwise. Thank you.
So I think that the way that we have to contextualize all of the finances and economics of this deal are as a whole. When the pilot and the financial agreements are ultimately discussed, there will be a financial analyst present to kind of show how all of these different things, came to bear. I understand that there are $3 million homes in this city. I think when you dig into those numbers, and I'm not the right person to do it, I think that the city has done very well for itself. I know it might be hard to believe, in the context that you provided. I sat through all those things. It was not an easy process with them. It was a long and drawn out process, quite frankly, of negotiating decimal points and interest rates and things like that. So this is a balancing act of long-term revenue for the municipality, upfront expenses. There's a gas line that runs under there that needs to be relocated. There's a lot of complications with this property in particular. There's relocating the parking and things that are expenses that have to go along with this. So I think what I just have to do is ask for your patience for now. But I do, of course, this will be covered ultimately as part of a broader discussion around finances. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
All right. Yeah, so hopefully mine will be easier than that one. That's a tough one.
You're right about that.
But my question, and actually related to the prior question from the person before her, but comes back to parking holistically, right? The parking lot that's being demoed now, I use that to get to the senior center when I take my kids to volunteer there, because the senior center parking is usually full by people that live there and visit there often. And then also the parking lot between the Y and the library, which I go to almost every day, either taking my kids to the Y, and with young kids, you can't just drop them off. You have to park and walk in, and sometimes you may stay there for 45 minutes, or sometimes you leave and you come back an hour later, right? But it comes really back to this as it stands. I love the way it looks. I don't actually get bothered by the size of it, but I do get bothered by the fact that the parking that's being demolished holistically in a block radius of this whole thing, plus, the additional parking spaces that appear to be added don't add up, because I feel like there should be more parking added than reduced holistically. And I didn't see that. Now, I can't say I didn't count the spaces, but it just didn't appear to be that way. It appears like there's a reduction in parking spaces holistically with an addition of traffic, whether it's either for commercial places or for residential.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, and if you guys want to supplement what I'm about to say, and it's just ironic that these two questions came back to back with each other, because when I had I was writing my notes to prepare to meet with you all today, there were two things that I knew that we couldn't cover today. One was these details on the finances, and the other was the bigger picture with regard to parking, because there is going to be other off-site parking temporarily provided as part of this, as the overall, some people asked about phases 1 and 2 and how that plays into the overall parking plan. So I promise you that I'm not going to come up with a third thing that we can't address, but those are the two things, and you guys are asking the right questions, and those will be kind of addressed in a future public session when they're essentially figured out. So we're not. I'm not saying I can't tell you. I'm saying I can't tell you right now. But there will be an answer on that. I appreciate your patience.
Good evening, Jim Bennett, 38 Fairview Avenue.
Hi.
I'm part of the fifth floor refrain. If you were to lop off the fifth floor and step back the fourth story to look like the fifth story, and thereby relieve some of the pressure on the city to provide police, fire, public school, and garbage removal. Would that still be economical?
It is something that, I mean, ultimately they could tell you if it would be something that's worth their time. It would not be economical under the current, like with that $8 million number, and the other finances were kind of optimized, you know, in terms of scale, purchase price for the city, offsetting the firehouse, long-term revenue to the city. So these are things that are, you know, not easy decisions, right? I think the gentleman who was being cheered on said, you know, I don't envy the position of some elected officials, but these are the types of things that are being balanced at all times in terms of what is the public interest and how best to advance it. So it's not something that that like this economic analysis has considered. So I can't answer the question directly, but under the current numbers that I've shown you, they would not. I do not believe that they would be able to support a reduction like that in the overall units.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. One of my questions is what is the added cost to the city for the maintenance of those public areas? I don't know whether they're public or if they fall under private land. Who maintains the trees? Going back to the garbage, I feel like we have a garbage problem already. Does this add to the problem? Does it help the problem? And does ultimately more maintenance reflect in more taxes for us?
Sure. Sorry. So John, I don't know. Like, I'll just say it out loud. What I'm about to say to him. I don't know if they've gotten far enough along to determine this trash collection issue. I think it's certainly something that we can be prepared to speak about the next time we're here. Do you have an answer on that right now? Okay. And then the second is about maintenance of private space. Ultimately, there is going to be an agreement, and the two attorneys are back there. You guys could say hi, Joe and Joanne. They write documents that are like this thick, right? And they say everything about how this thing is going to be managed, and everything from open space and who's going to manage it, who's going to program it, and all that. So I don't think, I mean, have you guys come to any agreements about management of open space or landscaping yet? So they anticipate it's there. So
can you show us in some of the photos which exactly remains
city
public
and
which is private?
So I think I'm answering the question you're asking. That all the spaces that they showed you as public spaces, one of the things that, you know, I'm a planner, I'm an idealist, you know, and like when buildings are being built and it's like, oh, this is a beautiful courtyard for our residents. That's not what these are. These are all, like, we call these inside-out buildings where, these are inside-out buildings where the things that are typically held as private open spaces are like popped outside to be part of the public realm and part of the public benefit. So all those thousands of square feet and hundreds of plants and stuff, those are all publicly accessible that will be available to people to walk through.
But privately owned.
Privately owned and privately maintained.
Okay.
So public, you know, perpetual public access.
Okay.
You can't, I don't want to.
The other questions that I have are, I feel like with the Cedar Street and the YMCA pickup and drop-offs and being able to shut down that plaza, there really is no time when parents aren't picking up and dropping off. Like, when do you foresee that being shut down where it's not an inconvenience to this building and or a community center?
Sure. You know, John, I don't know, you guys have spoken more with the Y about their operation, but there have been some discussions about using other areas for pickup drop-off like that, like alongside the building, potentially. So I don't know that, like, that starts to implicate the phases that they weren't prepared to discuss today. Be that as it may, I think the headline is, the thing to walk away with is that Cedar Street, I've lived in Summit for years. Like, Cedar Street's one of those streets, if you're not picking up and dropping people off at the Y, you'd kind of never even know it's there.
Oh, no, you do.
Okay, all right. I stand corrected. Point is, it's going to be vastly improved, and it does create the connections. The gentleman talked about how do we, how are we building something that supports the downtown? And for me, the thing that I think was the solution that this project offered was those pedestrian connections, to not create, like a sea of asphalt, and to try to blend those spaces. So I think Cedar Street is important from that perspective, to create a flow of traffic and to have pedestrians integrating with the YMCA, integrating with, like the residents in this building. So I think that's like the real headline. If it ends up not getting shut down, I still think that the utility and benefit that having a really good looking street is not taken away.
Okay. You showed some spaces where there was like a video screen and people sitting on a grassy knoll.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're looking to put in more of those. Is there not enough room on our village green already for those events?
Yeah.
Are we looking for more as residents, or?
So can I just, I'm going to answer the first question. Our conversations with the Y suggested that they might appreciate the opportunity to have outdoor programming spaces that would support them in their continued operation. So one of the advantages of the street closure slide for Cedar was actually to serve the Y in its sustained programming. So should the Y choose not to because it has too much to serve with the pool and basketball court access, totally understood. We can minimize the access, but we would theoretically want to perpetuate the treatments on the street to highlight the pedestrian activity, the drop-offs. When my 6-year-old gets out of the car, it's an adventure. So having that called out on the streetscape might be really advantageous, regardless of whether we ever close the street.
The green, do we need more? Do we not have enough space on a village green to hold the events that we want already?
No. This is a city with a great deal of resources which we do not want to cannibalize. The gentleman talked about retail, and we do not want to cannibalize retail. We would rather just extend what is good. So the necklace of green is intended to further connect spaces. It's a place to walk through and stay and hang out, as the case may be. So this is not to cannibalize the green. This is to offer another possible venue for programming. So, maybe there's the day where we go back to normal. We don't celebrate outdoor spaces quite as much as we do now, but I imagine that communities like ours will actually have appetite for more green, not less.
Okay. I'm sorry, I do have a lot of questions, because when the first go around of all of this was happening in our city, I had little kids and I was thinking about different things. Now I'm thinking about,
Would it be
my
easier
town.
for you to ask them all and we'll try to answer them all?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It seems like the traffic count that was shown to us might be slightly incomplete, because ridership is not quite back to the regular levels, as well as the use of the parking and all of that. Can you kind of talk to what the effect would have been had we been at full ridership level on the train and all the parking spots being used and stuff like that?
Sorry. I just can't help myself. So one thing I just wanted to tell you, and I was corresponding with our traffic engineer. There are two things about that traffic presentation I want you to know. One is that the city has a traffic engineer that has been evaluating this and kind of verified those numbers. So it's not just that we're 100% or you're 100% relying on the developer's traffic engineer in this regard. And number two, the numbers that they were using were done before COVID, so probably 2019 numbers.
Oh, I thought it said like September 23rd, 21 or something like that.
So he told me during the thing that all the traffic volumes that they were using. So I don't know exactly which slide, but that they were using pre-COVID numbers. But we can.
So.
Yeah, I would agree that.
I'm so glad my memory was actually really good on that date.
Kudos.
It's like really good. The other question I had was, how many public parking spaces are in that garage that you can access off of Cedar Street?
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. How many public parking spots are there in that first floor garage off of Cedar Street?
Do you know the number? Approximately 30.
30?
Yes.
That seems really low. Did
Sure.
St. Teresa's have any concerns about losing that parking on the corner? Because a lot of people use that parking for church. Where will St. Teresa's patrons park? I think there's more than 30 people that go to church, thank goodness.
Oh, do you want to do that? Sure.
Yeah, we have engaged with St. Teresa's, and
They were cool with it.
well, they are concerned with parking on Sunday, but we will continue to work with them to make sure that there is availability during the time that they need it. But it should be relatively a limited window Sunday mornings.
Okay. Are people going to have to pay for it?
No.
Okay. Will Broad Street be shut down during construction? Will there be some inconvenience? How long will that inconvenience last? Because they did that bridge over on the, and that took years. That was so inconvenient.
I don't know if
There will be no closure to Broad Street
Okay.
due to the construction. It isn't. Our firms have done construction in locales which have very much more tighter constraints and logistical challenges. This is not that.
One of them. Okay.
Broad Street is an expansive streetway, and somebody said on-street parking. There is no parking lane, and so we have the space to do that which we need. Did you ask how long?
Yes.
Do you-
Well, how long the closure would be if there was a closure.
So it's not applicable.
But how
okay.
long is the project supposed to take?
The construction period?
Yeah.
probably 18 to 24 months.
Okay. What happens if you don't get approval beyond this first phase? Like,
Regarding,
you didn't want to talk about phase 2, which is getting rid of that parking lot between the YMCA and the library, but ultimately, what happens to the whole plan if you're only allowed to develop 1 or 3, whichever one we're talking about, and the town is like, we've had enough, this is terrible?
Well, on the plus side, the city's process to date has empowered the city to suffer us and then decide if they want to continue the suffering. So by staggering this, it's probably in the city's interest to assure that they get the product they want out of us in phase 1.
Right.
Secondarily, we signed up for this in part because we wanted to help create a district that would add to extend the goodness that is Summit. And so we hope and expect that we will be back for more to present to you that which we need to accomplish, hope to accomplish on the other sites. The meaningful nugget here is that project finance requires that this effectively stand on its own. So in order to accomplish this, it really has to be evaluated on its own merits as if nothing else would happen. If we were to take a private construction loan, the construction lender would not want to be constrained by the unknowns of the future phases.
Okay. One other question. Even though I know this is being touted as a really walkable thing, and we want people walking around downtown and doing everything by walking, the reality is that a lot of those people who live in those units are probably going to DoorDash. And is there any room for all of those delivery quick vehicles that don't congest Broad Street and the surrounding area for that? Because the reality is they're not going to want to walk anywhere. I mean, they might want to walk to the train or something like that, but like they're still going to be sitting in their apartment, just like I'm sitting in my house and downtown Summit is half a mile away, and the kid says, let's DoorDash.
I think one of the virtues of this whole proposition is its accessibility to the downtown, and I hope that what we're doing here is actually adding a whole bunch of consumers who will patronize the Springfield convenience, the fact that there are so many things at one's fingertips, and DoorDash wouldn't solve for all of those needs in one fell swoop. But I think it was you who asked about the on-street parking resource.
Yeah.
So it's clear that one resource may be that on-street sidewalk access from those spaces we're constructing that don't exist now, that would serve for those DoorDash consumers. If they're also DoorDashing, they may actually just, the DoorDasher or the restaurant will deliver, right?
Well,
So-
the Door Dashers create really bad traffic problems in Summit. If you've noticed the cones and the space that has been not taken away, but now blocked on basically every street corner end. I'm just concerned that it will go beyond our downtown and then end up being the same problem over there.
Okay, we'll take that to
it's
heart.
just what I've thought about. Sorry.
Hi. I also, okay, sure, sorry.
Is that what that's there for?
I guess. Just a couple of questions. I also, just for the record, think 5 stories is too tall. But I'd also like to understand the length of that building. It just feels like it will way overwhelm any of the typical blocks that we have in the Summit downtown area, where you typically, you can't cut through buildings between, let's say, Maple and Beechwood, but it isn't that far of a distance. This looks very long. Can you tell me what the length of that building is?
It's over 250 feet long from Cedar Street to the corner of Morris. I don't recall the exact footage, but it's in that range.
Okay. And then what's a typical block like in Summit? Do you have any idea? Does anyone know if you're going to walk from, on Springfield Avenue and go from Maple to Beechwood?
It's interesting that you're asking this. We've spent a good deal of time talking about this because members of the steering committee were concerned on this point. I think one of the things that we did in evaluating this is there are precedents in Summit of the equal or greater length, and it may behoove us as part of like the email follow-up or postings that we highlight which buildings compare to make this one look manageable.
Okay, because it just seems very out of scale. I mean, it's a pretty building. I just think it looks very large. I also want to talk about the parking too, and I know you're not prepared to answer all of it now, but maybe you'll be able to answer it later. I wonder how many parking spaces are in that current lot now. Does anyone know? So it sounds like we're losing a lot of spaces between that lot and the 30.
I think it's 60 something, and so on the net basis, we're actually increasing the supply, but we're also increasing demand. So
we're increasing the supply of public spaces, forgetting the building's private spaces, the public spaces.
So, no, public spaces. We're retaining the same number. Or
Okay.
sorry, so it's where the existing parking supply, public spaces is 60, and we're providing for 30 in lieu.
Okay,
So
and then
we're not
someone was
replacing
yelling
one-to-one.
something about shared. I don't know what that means.
It's an allusion to a comment that I was making, which was that the public spaces, which is accessible from Cedar, the 30 or so spaces, may moonlight as residential spaces to the extent the residents either aren't satisfied by the spaces in the basement, or can't solve for their problem on street.
Okay. So that sounds a little bit problematic. It also sounds, when we are talking about also probably losing the parking lot between the Y and the library. So I've heard of grocery stores going in there, and I know that's a phase you can't talk about right now. But I'm assuming that will also be a very tall building there. So we're going to have a lot of very tall spaces. And I know parking lots aren't pretty, but they definitely keep open vista. And I'm afraid we're going to lose a lot of that. The last thing I just want to ask you about is access to those underground parking lots. I know it sounds pretty with all the green spaces, but those are really busy streets. Morris and Broad are probably the 2 busiest streets with, Morris probably the, highest speed street. So how are people going to access? I don't know if you can pull that screen back up and talk a little bit about that, but I'm a little bit worried about people coming in and out and having open spaces for kids and parks and art and bike racks. I'm a little concerned how that's going to fit in. Okay, great. That's all I have.
Thanks. While they're pulling up the plan, I need to correct the record a little bit on those parking counts that I had mentioned. So what I'm told by our engineer is that they were 21 counts, and then like what they've done is they've gotten counts from 2019 and they multiply them times to like factor it up. So that's what common practice is right now, is to take current counts and then sort of
Adjust
them-
upwards to
adjust them
account for
upward?
the non-typical conditions. Yeah.
So I just wanted to correct that.
Thank you.
And John, if you want to speak to this slide. Or Alex.
I think, okay.
So I think the
So
question.
the question was, Morris and Broad are two very busy streets. We're going to be having underground parking garage entrances. How will they be accessed, and how will they be accessed safely?
So there are two vehicular entrances into the building. One on Morris, which you can see down here, which is in from the intersection, and then one off of Cedar, which you can see over here. Those have been evaluated by our traffic engineer. They will include pedestrian safety measures. So, like for example, when a car is coming up the ramp, there are devices that notify that car that there are pedestrians in the vicinity within range of the ramp. And so that we are sensitive to that, and we'll make sure that there are safe crossings in those zones, and that those ingress and egress points for the garage are pulled far enough away from the intersection so as not to affect them. Most often in busy streets like this, cars coming out of the garage are limited to which direction they can turn, and that will be part of the overall site design that we have to complete for site plan approval. Yeah, I think the other entrance that's off of Cedar is a slower street, so I think we're less concerned about the speed at which cars are traveling, and our hope is that by these new pedestrian safety measures that we're implementing, we're calming traffic in that area and can maintain a safe pedestrian experience there.
Do you want to ask?
Thank you. I want to thank the mayor and other people for having, having made this area of our town one that we need to focus on, because it is truly an area that does need redevelopment. But I have some really strong concerns about some of the redevelopment that's been suggested. And I'm also very concerned about separating this into 3 separate plans. So one of the things I would like to ask a question about is, you said there were 140 units in this development. How big are those units, and how many people can live in each one of those units?
The units range in size. We have studios up to 3 bedrooms, and the square footage ranges from approximately 500 square feet up to over 1,200 square feet.
Okay,
there's
so
a
how
big
many
range.
1,200 square feet units are there?
I don't think we've finalized the exact count, and I don't have that information with me. We can provide that.
Because I noticed that when you talked about the school population, you kind of were fudging on what you were saying. And I think one of our major concerns should be, is this really going to bring more money into Summit, which has been one of the goals? Or are there lots of things we haven't thought about that are going to cost us money, and so therefore it may not be as beneficial a program as we have kind of thought that it would be. So I think that needs to be looked at very carefully, because if the school population went up a great deal, I think that could make a very big difference in our plan for it to return money to the city. I'm very concerned about downtown. With the Short Hills Mall being so close, with the Westfield downtown being so well developed, with Route 22 being so close, I think sometimes our downtown really struggles to keep even. I know a very large owner of a very big building downtown who is very careful to try to keep the building filled, and has to negotiate prices down sometimes just to keep it filled. Our downtown, I think, is at risk, and we need to be careful to think about that. I'm also a strong proponent of the library, and I think by separating the library from the rest of this plan, you've talked about the YMCA now, but you've shoved the library off to the side. And that library lot was given by a family in the early 1900s to always be a library. And I'm certainly hoping you're not planning on putting another 5-story building there with the library just being on the first floor. Thank you, by the way. I'm also very concerned that the parking garage is not going to denigrate how access to the library is achieved. Right now, it's very nice. You can drive right up next to the library and get out. I went there twice today, actually, and it was very nice to be able to access the library without having to go in and out of a parking garage. And I think that's something that we need to remember. The other thing I noticed in your traffic surveys was that you only considered traffic in that area and a little bit of Summit, but not all of Summit, and not connecting to the rest of the world. I live on Blackburn, a corner of Blackburn Road and Oak Knoll Road, which is just a half a block from Pine Grove. I walk in my neighborhood a lot. You cannot believe the traffic that's coming across Pine Grove Road. If the density of people living in downtown Summit is greater, they want to get to the medical center. They want to get to New Providence, whatever. They're going to find back roads to go on because they want to avoid lights and they want to avoid school traffic and whatever else they want to do. And so I think your traffic concerns need to be broader than just the area that you covered. So I remember when that area of Summit was literally almost a slum. I was on a board that worked to kind of increase the activities and the lives of the people in that area. And I was sorry in some ways to see that that area was not developed to make us have a more integrated city, but it is completely gone now. It needs to be developed, but it needs to be developed in a way that will not make us more urban. We don't want to be South Orange. We want an urban, a suburban community that is beautiful and that is walkable and is livable for the people in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I just had another question. Could you, oh, thank you. Could you pull up the traffic study? Because I had a question. If I understand that it's all circular and you have to still evaluate if someone's going to be able to make a left turn out of the parking lot. But have you ever considered the people that are entering the parking lot? So if you're eastbound on Morris Ave, right after that light is the entrance to your garage. You're going to back up a ton of traffic that way as people are going to try to get into that garage. So I think that's something that also needs to be examined, as well as the entrance on Chestnut Street. When you're talking about the flow of the Y traffic and everything like that at the height of hours, when people are coming in and coming out, that's going to cause a real problem, and I think that needs to be examined as well.
Thank you very much. Here you go.
I think one of the issues that a lot of us are trying to come to grips with is that this is going to be the largest multi-family residential project that the City of Summit has ever done. And a lot of long-term residents of the City of Summit did not really ever envision this community becoming something that is denser than what it is right now. And a lot of us who have moved into Summit in the past 20, 25 years have done so because of what the amenities are. Now, we do understand and accept that we do need to grow, and if this project does have a financial benefit that justifies its progress, then that's something that we should be aware of. And so the numbers are going to be important to understand. From a programming standpoint, can you tell me exactly, is the residential units going to be rental or will they be condominiums? They are rental. Okay, so that means that there's going to be a homeowners association that will be involved with
Sorry. So a homeowner association would be if they were a condominium.
Right.
So it'll be owned by, their outfits, and there would be a management company that would manage it.
Okay. And will there be published information on just what the impact is going to be on the infrastructure as far as the waste management as well as the water and sewage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to just repeat on purpose points that have already been made because I think they're really salient ones.
Sure.
The one that goes to the 5-story height of the building, when you explain that the frontage along Broad Street is 250 feet and a 5-story height, I'm hard-pressed to think of any examples in town that are similar to that in the massiveness of the urban scale that that would make. And I think it shows very clearly when you look at the site plan that looking just from the roof plan, that the senior housing complex across the street, which I consider to be a large building for Summit, is not even half the size of what you're showing for the new housing unit, the mixed use with housing above. So I think that really needs to be carefully considered. One speaker remarked about the fact that you can't cut through that whole massive 250-foot long facade like you can do in towns like Madison where there's little alleyways that let you through. That's part of the problem, but I also think, tell me where else in town we have this precedent. I can't, I'm racking my brain, I can't think of anything. The second point would be, I don't think you can ever underestimate the need for parking in Summit. And I say that because I watched the YMCA get expanded and what used to be the YWCA, now the Connection, be enlarged. And always with the assurances that there would be adequate parking. And to this day, I cannot drive down my own street, Prospect Street, 2 or 3 times during the day, certainly in the summer, because of the long line of traffic that's picking up at the Connection. So I feel that parking is always improperly or inadequately provided for in Summit. And really that plus the point that was made very early on this evening about reaching out to everyone in the community via a mailing or some kind of resource, more use of Facebook or whatever, and a mailing, because there's so many people that know nothing about this development. And I think that there needs to be more transparency and outreach.
Thank you, ma'am.
I've lived in Summit for 50 years or so, and I have 2 comments to make. One is I'm concerned about the height and the height as it fits in with the rest of the town. I don't see any working here of trying to make the buildings sort of blend. One of the charms of going into downtown Summit is I like to look above the parts that are modern underneath and look at the lines, and they're all 19th century lines or early 20th century, 1918, the Wolf Block building and things like that. And I don't see that here, and particularly with the massive size of the residence building that you're building. The other thing is that I think it's very hard to consider District 3 not out of contents of the other 2 parts. And that's come up very clearly this evening. And to separate them, you may, economically, as the way you've explained, you have to think of it that way, but they're really very intertwined, particularly with parking and traffic and parking, traffic, and those 2 things are very important. So I think you need to, I would like you all, including the council, and I'm looking at you, Mayor, only because you're the only council person I can recognize right now. Your group, I thought as much. I think you have to think about consistency between the downtown we have, even including the style of the lampposts. All of the amenities that have been shown here are very, very modern. Now we're not that old, fuddy-duddy-ish, but we do have, we've done new streetscaping, and the lampposts ought to maybe be the same That's just a small point. It's a small point to illustrate that the style of what you're doing needs to be very much like the style of current downtown, and it ain't 5 stories.
Hi. Just things that people have already touched on. But Morris Avenue is already a very heavily trafficked street. It's the cut through from Chatham beyond the Short Hills Mall to come straight through Summit. The Summit Middle School is on Morris Avenue. The kids are crazy crossing the streets. You're not going to change that. To put 2 entrances, because essentially you say one is on Cedar Street, that's dumping out onto Morris Avenue. Where's that going to dump out to? Morris Avenue? But Cedar goes somewhere. Cedar's going to be stopped. You're going to have a park at one end and the entrance onto Morris Avenue at the other. So essentially, both entrances to this building are on Morris Avenue. You can't count Cedar Street because it's an extension. It's a driveway. You're turning it into a driveway. My other question is, who has the reins over this 30 parking spaces? Is that the development or the city?
Yeah, and what do you,
Okay, so
by
you'll have
reins?
overnight parking there. You'll allow overnight parking. So essentially when they have 1 parking space in the building and 2, 3 cars, you have 3-bedroom apartment, you've got 3 roommates, 3 cars, where are they going to park? They're going to take up those 30 parking spaces. So I don't really see that being public parking very often, especially people working from home, not moving their cars. You know, it's that. That's that. Question, the tax deal, I don't really understand that, so hopefully in the emails that can be explained better. My fear is that the county will realize there's some little bait and switch going on and they're losing out on some taxes. Okay, good. That the money will still, adequate money will be into the schools. The other part of this is, this affects over 20,000 people in this town. I forget what I should know what our population is now. Shouldn't something like this be a vote to, I know it's development and we don't get, you don't get to say in everything, but something that is obviously, this many people affected and this many people concerned over it, I just feel like it's a vote, not just sort of like, you've lived here all this time, you pay all this money in taxes, and, this is what we're doing. We're dumping 140 units on this block, and it's going to be pretty, so, like it. And not to diss the council. You guys are great. You do wonderful work, but this just, I feel like, is a vote issue, not really we're doing it.
Thank you. If you'd like, go ahead.
Okay.
Stand on your black mark.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Mayor and Council. I know full well what it's like to be an elected official, as you well know. I've lived here 60 years, so I'm an old lady now, as you can well imagine. But about 30 years ago, we needed a new city hall very badly. Well, this town, and you're learning very quickly, and thank you. It's been a wonderful presentation, by the way. But you are learning very quickly, and maybe you already know, but Summit never does anything very quickly. We talk about things, and we should talk about things. And everyone tells me Summit's a great, wonderful, magic community. And it is, but we take a long time to do stuff. City Hall took us, believe me, a very long time. Most of the council wanted it on the village green. The citizens didn't. We went and visited coffee after coffee after coffee into the homes and really brought it out to the people. And I do think that's what you have to do now. You have to bring it out to the people so that they really know more about it. I am not against this, but I plead you, please look at this parking. When we were on council, we made a vow that we would do enough parking for City Hall. We didn't until we got Chestnut Street parking. When you have court day on Wednesday, let me tell you, it is jammed. And I have to say, St. Teresa's does use that. That happens to be my parish, that's very true. But it is part of what our community is all about. So just thank you for listening. You've been wonderful, and we're long lookers here in town. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, thank you. I have a little real-life experience I would like to share with you. You're familiar with Elm Street. Elm Street has a condominium development on it. I've worked with the town engineers on this, so we've got an infrastructure problem here. Morris Avenue is not owned by Summit. It's owned by the county. And we've had some flash floods that have totaled cars. The storm sewers do not adequately take care of that street. And we're at wit's ends as to what to do about it because it comes into our driveway. And the other thing I would comment on is after 3 o'clock, after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we can't pull out of our driveway. The street's backed up all the way to the hospital. So there is a traffic issue there. I'm all for this development, particularly if it brings to our area a grocery store and maybe a relocation of CVS, which I think we might lose because they're shutting CVS's, and that store does not meet their business model. So I'm concerned about that. But I do think you really need to look in working with the county to try and get some of the storm sewers fixed because it floods and it's not pretty.
Thank you. Just by a show of hands, we have the space for about another 8 minutes or so. We're scheduled to go to 9. I know the woman in the red coat would like to speak by virtue of the fact that she's standing up. By show of hands, like who else would like to say a word, just so I can kind of get an idea about. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So just, keep it in mind. If there's things that people have already said, I don't mean to quiet anybody, but if there's things that have already said, we're here collecting information. We're here taking notes. We do this for a reason. We do this so we can hear you. You're the experts on your community. We're the experts on planning, and they're the experts on building. We want to hear from you, but at the same time, let's try not to be repetitive, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I really like the idea of the development, but we have a very clear vision of a net zero energy economy by 2050, halved by 2030. Why is this not a net zero energy building or development? It's a very large building.
Okay. I don't know if that'll be answered today, but I think it's a good question to ask. John, I don't know if you guys want to say anything about sustainability?
Sure. I think it's a really interesting question, and we have dealt with, we have met the mandate in other locales. We've developed the first substantially affordable passive house building in New York. I think the struggle may tie back to some of the other questions people asked, which is the balance of what we're all trying to effectuate here, whether it's adequate property tax generated from the project through this pilot arrangement that we're going to talk about at another occasion, purchase price. At some point, we've had to make some choices, and we value sustainability and will pursue a sustainable target. Net zero may be beyond the reach of what we have to offer here, and yet it is a goal I know that we as a society should be thinking about, and to the extent we can improve upon what we establish at day one, we will do that through further investment. Since we intend to be long-term owners, we don't expect that the job is done once we complete.
Hold on. The question was, are you pursuing any LEED building certification or WELL building certification?
We had not intended to pursue those certifications, but we were going to self-police effectively and pursue a sustainable design standard that we have achieved on multiple of our projects. We do take this seriously. I do believe the LEED and WELL standards are well-intentioned. I don't know necessarily whether the imprimatur is as important as actually the execution.
If we do it without a certification, I saw the solar panels that would go on the building, but I highly doubt that would cover 1 to 2% of what's the energy being used in the building. So I would be wary to say that it's a sustainable building design.
Understood.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Ma'am?
A little bit more clarification on the parking for the building that you're building. Because I heard 140 units, and I heard 196 required spaces, and I heard 30 spaces available off of Cedar Street. How many are actually built to service the building?
Oh, that wasn't the question I thought you were going to ask.
It's the question I'm asking.
125. It's right now there are 125 in the building. We're working to finalize resources outside of the building.
So you're going to have an underparked building to add to the parking problem the town already has.
So I said that there was two things that I can't fully finalize, that aren't finalized today. There's one, going to be an off-site parking arrangement, and two, the stuff about the final finances, which will be discussed.
How can you finalize this arrangement without addressing the parking? We're underparked as it is.
So just to be clear about what today is, this is not a finalization. We're here to listen.
Right.
And we're hearing these concerns. I've said up front that there were two things that couldn't be addressed today.
Right.
One of them was off-site parking, and one of them
I
was
don't understand how you can enter into agreements to build something if the parking isn't addressed.
And I absolutely agree with you.
Well, but does that mean that's going to be addressed and solved before this is entered into?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can stand there.
Okay, thank you. I thought your presentation concerning the grounds and the facilities surrounding the building, but I really haven't heard much about the building. Are you going to address that at a future meeting, or are we just to assume it's being built?
I mean, if you could tell us some things that you're particularly interested in, and like kind of what you mean by that, we could be.
I want to know what the design.
Oh, sure.
How many apartments per size? Just
okay.
I think I want to say I'd like to see the building explained to us as well as the surroundings were explained to us.
Yeah. So let me. Thank you, ma'am, for that comment. And I think that one of the things that's worth mentioning is that we've been here for all of the presentations. These presentations have been additive, and they've kind of built on each other. We maybe neglected to realize that you all haven't been here for every single one of them. So there have been presentations where the other sub-phases were detailed and the design for the other sub-phases were included. There have been presentations, I don't know where she went, but there you are, where those exact types of things were provided. So we may need to do like a refresh on those things and bring some of that information back to you in the near future. And those things are also on the municipal website for everybody to look at their leisure. There's an entire page. Sir.
Sure.
All right.
That's your black
Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The presentation looked great. Very impressive. I'm a big supporter of something happening on the site for sure. I don't really have a question about the project itself so much as the development entity, if you can talk about that. And I apologize, I missed the very first 5 minutes of the meeting tonight, and that may have been addressed a little bit. But a couple things. A, is it possible to talk a little bit about the development history of the partnership between L&M and Toll, and what experience you guys have had as two entities working together? Two, if that hasn't happened, if you could talk a little bit about your individual experiences with that. And then also, thirdly, if there are other projects you can kind of cite as an example, I'd love to go take a ride on a Saturday and see what else you guys have done within, say, a 30-mile radius of the 5 boroughs to say, Summit's incomparable, that's why we all live here, but what else is comparable that's been done in a similar downtown setting that's in the sort of suburban, commutable radius of New York?
Sure. Thank you. And I see you looking at me. I work for you guys. I don't work for them. I know. I just always want to clarify that.
So we've, prior to this project, Toll Brothers and L&M have worked on 2 projects together. One was a condominium in Brooklyn, in New York City, on the East River, which we developed jointly in 2008, 2009. It was a great time to sell condos, but it was a great time to develop a partnership. But to John's point, it was a great time to develop a partnership because we did develop a large project in a not a great time to deliver one, and while the timing wasn't ideal, I think it turned out very well, and we, I guess, gained enough trust to do it again, and we're currently building a project in Washington, D.C. That's a 3-phase, approximately 1,200 unit project. The first 561 unit phase is currently under construction and is scheduled to deliver this spring. And this would be our 3rd project together.
Comparable projects.
Comparable projects within, not that we've done together, but the closest rental project that Toll Brothers has done is, we have 2 projects in West Windsor, the Muse at Princeton Junction, which was developed in 2006 and we still own. We developed a project adjacent to that, Park Princeton Junction, which was built in 2016, I believe, and we recently sold. We also have a project in Jersey City, the Morgan at Provost Square.
And just to be clear about what you're asking, are you asking about like general, like district level mixed use projects or things that they've done?
Well, both. The question's really, it's sort of twofold. It's A, what experience do you have doing somewhat similar, whether it's in scope or in setting, the type of projects that might be comparable to this one. You could say, oh, you know what, we did something, I'm making up a town. We did something like this in New Rochelle, New York, or we did something like this in Garden City, Long Island, or we did something like this in, so, to be able to talk about a few of those things where a downtown was getting a significant development that altered in a positive way, or negative way, but hopefully in a positive way, what was done, and it would be a good way for someone to go visit it and say, oh, they did a really nice job here, this is great. So how can you speak to something that might assuage some of those concerns?
Yeah, thank you. Anything else on L&M side?
It's funny because I'm loath to cite any community and put it astride Summit and say that's comparable, because I think part of the first 5 minutes of the presentation was we see this as an opportunity to celebrate Summit and extend what is good here, and that is in the form of green space. That's in the form of the activation we propose to make, extend Springfield Avenue and downtown across the tracks. Brian did a nice job, I guess, highlighting some of Toll's background as well as Toll's background with us. L&M has a portfolio of 15,000, 20,000 units. Our portfolio runs the gamut from market rate modular projects in San Francisco to all affordable projects in New Orleans built after after Katrina in Lafitte. But maybe the closest geographically and closest might have been the New Rochelle projects, where we're among those. It was weird. Right, so we're doing a number of projects in New Rochelle, and our firm is based in Larchmont, which might think it's on the level of Summit, but a lot of our more recent work in New Jersey has been in Newark, which is certainly not akin to Summit, but we took seriously the challenge of pursuing the redevelopment of the Haynes department store, which was a extraordinary building built in the early 20th century to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the department store. So the department store was founded in 1858, and we worked with the community as broadly defined in Newark, which is folks who work for Prudential, folks who work for Rutgers, folks who work for, Audible, this Amazon subsidiary, the guys on the street, the homeowners in Newark. And we discovered the import of the site and the building, and the end product is a reflection of the community effort. And sessions not dissimilar to this, where we heard how important the building was to the community and how important, for example, the completion of the street wall on Halsey Street was to the sustaining of retail vendors there. And it is a product of a partnership like the one we have with your mayor and your steering committee here, your council members, to shape a building that will be equal to its context. So having said all that, I hope I answered your question. We can maybe include a link to both our websites to make sure that people know, what we've been up to.
Yeah, we'll include a link on the websites. And I do encourage you to check out the Whole Foods that they built. It's pretty cool. Thank you.
Bit of a grab bag of questions here for you, but that's what we're doing at 9 o'clock. Did the traffic study contemplate, or rather account for the contemplated permanent closure of Maple Street between Union and DeForest? Do you know?
Yeah, this is
that's a recent development.
Yeah,
very,
I know.
Recent development.
Yeah, it's very recent. I've spoken with one consultant who may be working on that. I think there's like first in, first out. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but that the projects that come after each other need to consider each other. So whether Maple should close or not, we'll need at such a time that it does, depending on where this project is, we'll need to consider its impacts. But I think with that said, we would have, and I know that this came up in some conversations with the city officials, even though it's evolving now, it's certainly something that we could look at. We haven't looked at it yet, but it is a recent thing. Okay. Yeah.
Next is the workforce housing counted towards Summit's affordable housing obligation?
No.
Okay. Is the pilot being considered, is that the first time a pilot's been executed here in Summit?
I think so.
I don't know.
Yes, it is.
It would be the first pilot?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh, housing authority. So there's redevelopment pilots, and then there's pilots by virtue of Housing Mortgage Finance Agency financing. So it's the first redevelopment pilot.
On the subject of the housing authority, were residents of the housing authority specifically invited to join this evening's
I don't know if they were specifically invited here, but they have been engaged, and there are certain things. I know we're not talking about the other subphases right now, but that there are certain improvements that are being contemplated to their facility as part of all this.
And finally, can you speak to the anticipated planning board application, and specifically any concessions at this point you would anticipate as L&M Toll Brothers requesting that defer from the existing DRO?
That's a good point. Yeah. So if you ask them, they've made a ton of concessions already. But no, so we have a redevelopment plan. So this is a little different. So typical zoning, and this is for another day. That's like maybe not 9 o'clock. The typical zoning is the DRO, as the gentleman mentioned. You have planning board, zoning board. This redevelopment process is done when you have large, complicated pieces of property or large, complicated projects. That's why we're all here. That's why we're not sitting in front of the planning board right now. This is a very specific and different type of public process that has created its own zoning already. So what is happening as a result of what you saw up there is consistent with the redevelopment plan that was adopted in 2019, around there. So there is like an overlay of zoning essentially that was created for this area, 3 years ago, I guess now, and this is consistent with that. So thank you. Hopefully it's okay. This is the last speaker, the last quick speaker.
I don't want to repeat the too tall and too wide, but just a quick little blurb. My sister moved out from Brooklyn to the suburbs a few years ago, and I asked my 6-year-old niece, do you like it better in the suburbs? And she said, yeah, it's so much brighter here, right? It's brighter. I mean, that's why people move to the suburbs. So it's just something to consider. I think that's why we're all like, why is it 5 stories? We moved from Brooklyn to not be there. And then secondly, just a half point, half question. When will we see the financial analysis of all this? Because when it was first kind of sold to us, it was a lot of financial. It was, the tax base, And so without the financial analysis, it's almost hard to analyze any of this, because in the what's in it for us, we don't even know that. So that's just, I don't know if we know when that conversation will be. So that's it.
Yeah, and broadly speaking, in the next couple months, that information will be presented. But we wanted to, all this is incremental and it's complicated. You have traffic, you have design, you have architecture, you have landscape architecture, you have finance, you have legal. So we need to stop at certain moments, show you all what we've been up to, listen to you, refine things. So the final financial deal, the finances really can't be finalized until we know what the job is, what the product is. So that's why I have to wait until we know, sort of like to let this thing land. I understand your frustration with it's my frustration too with the kind of the incrementalism of all this. So suffice to say, hopefully, in the next couple months, all of that will be shared. I think some of the things that I also heard, not to say that this is my exhaustive recitation of all the things I've heard, but some of the things that I've heard is that there is the information online. I encourage you to write to the email address if you find that information that's there to be insufficient to answer your questions about things that were already covered. And we do check that email regularly. We will listen if additional kind of information, Q&A, whether online or whatever, needs to be provided. And otherwise, I just really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I appreciate all your great questions. This is not the end, right? Everybody is still listening. We have to come out here and we have to, do this and take a risk and show you something and listen. And I think that what I see amongst all of you is a community that really cares about Summit. And I think for that reason, we're all giving this a chance. So I thank you. So the process that we had up there, we had a slide. So the question was, who has the final say on the project? Somebody asked about, should everybody get a vote on it? Actually, in New Jersey, little factoid, that's illegal. You can't have referendums on zoning changes. But ultimately what will happen is the city council, common council, sorry, is going to take a few actions, to move ahead with this. One, the initial two are a redevelopment agreement, which is like that thick document that outlines every single thing about how many trash cans and who takes them out and how many trees and who checks them every day. And then, among other really important things too. And then a financial agreement, which would spell out what's the taxes and over the course of time, how does that increase and whatever. So those are the two things that would be needed, and then it would go to the planning board. And the planning board would approve this just like any other site plan application like the gentleman asked about, where all the engineering happens, where all the landscape, all the architecture, all of that kind of gets vetted just like any other board application. So all this is happening before it goes to the planning board. Typically this happens as you go to the planning board. So that's one of the reasons we use this process as planners as a matter of legal process, because it provides that level of control and that level of back and forth input. We couldn't do this at a planning board. I couldn't stand up here, your elected officials couldn't stand up here and sort of craft this project. So that's why we use redevelopment. So the question was, how do you let the Common Council know whether you're against it or for it? So the typical way is that you show up and you voice. There will be a public hearing ultimately on the resolution to do the agreement, and there'd be a public hearing on a financial agreement. Those are two opportunities for you to come speak. An email address, and pick up the phone or reach out to your council representatives. Sir. The question was, is the agreement just for District 3? Right now, yes. The answer will be yes. So the question was, I'm repeating this not to be whatever, because people at home can't hear me, or can't hear you. So even though they're so vastly intertwined, we have to separate them. And for this purpose, we need... So look, I'm a big I do my job, right? I'm an urban planner, I'm a visionary. I want to solve all the things at once, and ultimately we need to discipline ourselves, because it can't all get done at once. If we do, we'd be doing the planning work forever. At some point, you have to stop. And the question that you have to ask yourself when you do that is, can it function independently? Can it function on its own? And if it can, you have to start somewhere, right? And so this is the first phase of a larger project. I heard from a number of people that they wanted to understand, and we have in the past provided some level of like vision level, not this level of detail, but vision level what's happening on those later phases. So the answer is yes, it's only this phase, and that we are trying to make this stand alone to the greatest extent possible, because I think that somebody asked, like, what if you decide that you don't like this or whatever? And it's my obligation, it's your council's obligation, it's all of our obligation to each other to make sure that we don't end up with something that creates like a half-built neighborhood that can't function because one domino was dependent on the next. So that's what we're looking at in terms of our professional responsibility to make sure that this thing is self-sustaining. This one phase is self-sustaining, even though from its benefit, from its parking, from all these other things, there is a level of integration that we're all aiming toward. We have to be prepared for this to stand on its own. Okay, I wasn't planning on this part of this thing, but I'll take one more, and then I'm going to call it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So, ma'am, yes, please. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Ma'am, I'm really sorry to cut you off. I hate to interrupt you, and it's not my intention to do that, but people at home can't hear you right now. There will be plenty of opportunities. You could email us. We will get back to you if you'd like to kind of have this conversation. But I'm gonna suggest that we end this now. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything, like final words. I always go to the mayor.
Just thank you very much for coming. We have learned a lot. We have a lot of notes. I know that Council President Fox has been taking notes. I've been taking notes. I'm sure everybody else who's been involved with council is taking notes too. You made a lot of good points. We'll take it all into consideration. Thank you. Good night. Drive safely.